In this video, you're going to see this cabinet transformed into one that is custom in about a half an hour using an old film that's past its due date. We'll talk about that later. Obviously, with these type of cabinets, it's really important to take all the hardware off. Now, if you watched a lot of videos on the Wrap Institute, I showed how to wrap this style of cabinet in an earlier video series with a full print wrap by leaving the hardware on. How to leave the hardware on in that case because it had a lot of full print going on that was going on over these handles. But in this case, because this is color change, it's really good to take that hardware off just to make it so much quicker and easier to install. So it took about 10 minutes to take all the hardware off total. Then it's about measuring and get everything on point. So the material that's going on the front doors right now is a gloss blue metallic. So really smart in terms of how you cut the film. And I'll explain why in a second. You'll see in terms of the install. So notice I'm using the logo on the liner right now to guide my blade, make sure the panel is wide enough, top and bottom. But if you see here, there's a hinge going top to bottom. And this is the edge of the blue piece that I'm putting on now is straight off the roll. So it's just plumb straight. And because that edge right at the side of the hinge right now is straight as well, what I'm doing now is I'm focusing, basically making my permanent hinge now right at the edge of the bottom of the hinge. So by locking in right there and tucking it in nice and clean, that means later I don't have to pick it up and tuck it in and then cut that out because it fits in there like a puzzle piece. So oftentimes using a pre-cut piece and fitting it in there will just save a lot of time and create nice good workflow as you're wrapping. So now we get to the sides right now. Because this film was used for WrapsCon, this was actually a gloss metallic film that we actually put a lamination on. This is around 7 mil thick, so super thick. Normally it's around 3.8 mil thick, but because it's got that extra calendar lamination on top right now, notice that I heated it and I'm really taking my time rounding that corner right at the front and I'm feeding into the 90-degree turn at the base. And then before I cut the material on the edge right now, I'm doing a lot of relaxing right now. This is only because it's thicker. So this is what you have to do oftentimes when you're doing wrapping with thick film, is really relax it around those edges. Otherwise it's going to pinch on those corners or lift out of those areas. So really taking time to do that is extremely important. And then cutting off the handle, very easy. So but I noticed again on the left, don't have to go back and cut that area right there. Just always make sure I come back in with heat, seal the deal. Very important because this is extra thick film now, just to make those edges are super tight and sealed. Very important to use the hard side of my squeegee. Really just kind of go from top to bottom, 100% on the edge, and then just make sure all the edges are sealed right over the raised objects right now. Now for this side, just see the difference in terms of time. This, I just wanted to show the difference between not having a pre-cut piece that fits in here, but having to pick it up and tuck it in. So this is real time right now. Take my free hand, pick the material up, go to top to bottom. Once I get it to the top now, it's all tucked in nice and clean. Once it's tucked in nice and clean, I have to go down and cut now. And again, what I want to emphasize right now is this is not the end of the world. It's only going to cost, let's say, an extra 20 to 25 seconds to do this. But one of the things that I really like to emphasize on the Wrap Institute is trying to think outside the box, think a little bit ahead before you start to wrap, and then you don't have to take time to do this, because right now by cutting there is just an outside chance of my knife jumping out and cutting the cabinet right now. But if I have a pre-cut piece in there beforehand, which I'm cutting on a cutting table now, or just cutting straight off the roll, I avoid any type of mistakes and just lower my install time. So always try to think about that, especially when you're wrapping these style of cabinets. So with the doors done, we're going to get to the sides. Now the material for the sides is a textured film. It's a leather finish, so because it's textured, I'm changing my install technique now in the sense that I sprayed it with soap and water using a wet buffer because I'm pressing extremely hard now. This material that I'm putting on is just as thick, but slightly different than the gloss that went on the front. So because I'm pressing extremely hard, there's a high chance of me scratching it. So because this is a textured film, it doesn't have a lamination layer built in, so if I do scratch it, it's going to have to be a redo. So and that's why I sprayed it with soap and water. So always change how you install based on what you're wrapping. You always have to think about that textured film versus gloss film versus matte film. Now here at the base, while taking the screws out of the molding on the side right there, one of the screws just kind of broke as it was coming out. So obviously it just tells you that the quality of the cabinet, even though it was a great price point, some of the elements of the manufacturer went a little cheap on. So the quality of the screw broke. So what can you do? So in this case, making some relief cuts there and working around. So obviously when I make the relief cuts, make them deep enough that they're going to go behind the molding. Now with this material, again, what I mentioned earlier is nice and thick and it's textured, which means it has a kind of a multi-layer type feel. So here as I round it around the corner, add heat to really make sure it's flush on that corner, then squeegee it around. So very important that you adapt to the type of film, especially around those corners right there. Now on the side of the hinge right there, just make a tuck and cut top to bottom. Very important to keep the angle of the blade very clean right there. We want to make sure it just goes about a 90-degree angle so you get full coverage, but not too much material, because if you have too much material in that gap, it can lift over time. Now for that hinge at the bottom, see how it tucked in nice and clean right at the base. And even here on the corner, I'm going to pinch with my fingers and heat. So this is just really making sure it's nice and tight and solid on that corner. Now for this side over here, with this molding at the base, it comes off nice and clean. So these 4 screws came off nice and easy. So now I come in with a pre-cut piece. This I'm going to slide under the molding on the right there, and then take it all the way to the left where the molding came off completely. So by sliding under there and then coming across, I get full coverage. Now what you have to appreciate with this piece too is it's pre-cut just like the gloss blue that went on the front doors. Why I'm coming with a pre-cut piece now is because I want this black textured leather to go slightly inside the gap right there so I get full coverage. I don't want to see that gray when the doors are closed, so I need to go a little deeper. So I make some relief cuts on the side right there, vertical, so it flips down nice and clean. But by having a pre-cut piece in here right now, I just can run my finger from side to side, round that edge, but notice I'm going to use heat now to kind of make sure it rounds nice and clean. But the main point is, by having a pre-cut piece, you don't have to go back and cut this straight, don't have to use knifeless tape. So really important just to go to a cutting table, cut that piece straight so it folds over, and that actually saves time during the install. So always, I'm a big fan of doing a lot of good prep before you install, and that can actually lead to faster install times. Oftentimes, if you just kind of cut directly on the surface right there, there's a high chance of cutting the cabinet. But right now, there's no chance of cutting directly on the cabinet because I'm only cutting on the sides, and that piece that was directly on the surface was pre-cut and fits in like a puzzle piece. So here, a nice good clean cut straight away, and then the molding goes back in nice and easy and straightforward. So they got full coverage at the bottom, but again, have an overlap. That overlap of the pieces from the sides to the front is hidden behind the molding, nice and clean. So no reason to make these into one piece. Installs, they can be multiple pieces, especially same thing here at the top where I got that 1/4 inch or that 1 centimeter piece that's kind of pre-cut that's floating just in front of my face right there that's going to wrap around. Make the relief cuts on the side straight down, fold that piece around the top. So again, pre-cut piece is nice, easy, and straightforward. And one thing you should appreciate about the material that I'm putting on this cabinet is this film that's outdated. So this is a color change film that was from Rapscon 2016 and 2017. So this is material that, let's say, for example, you couldn't sell to your client that's been sitting on the shelf for a while. What you can do is just repurpose it for your shop. So there's no warranty on this, but again, this is just going on cabinets that are going around your sign shop. So you can take a plain boring cabinet and about a half-hour transform it with film that you just basically are not going to be able to sell to a client. So I really like repurposing film instead of just throwing it in the trash and getting rid of it. And then obviously with everything wrapped is putting the hardware back on nice and clean and straightforward. And then going around and doing a 360 and making sure all the edges are sealed. Keep in mind, as I said earlier, this film was extra thick. This gloss film on the front was around 6 to 7 mil thick. The material on the sides was around 6 mil thick. So it's very important to do a 360 around every edge and make it with heat and then a squeegee and make sure all the edges are 100% sealed. Be extra thorough during this process. Go over any raised objects, look for air and bubbles. So this can take some time for sure, but it'll get you that high good quality for the long term. And then here's a shot of the final result, and I love the transformation, taking that hyper good ultra gloss metallic on the blue on the front that really goes well with the textured on the side, and you can see that nice leather feel. So a nice leather cabinet with blue gloss on the front. Hope you enjoyed a lot of these tips and techniques. Thank you for watching. Justin Pate.